here at Stow Historic Town Hall, and we're talking to Amber Christoffersen from the DCR to talk about the rail trail.
Great, thanks Lynn. Thanks for having me. My name's Amber Christoffersen. I work for DCR, which stands for the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. Our mission is to protect, promote, and improve the state's natural, cultural, and recreational resources. We own about 500,000 acres of public land for the Commonwealth to enjoy. Yep. So today I'm here to talk about greenways, and as some people ask, what's a greenway? It's a linear park that has a shared use path running through it where people can run, walk, bike, skate, push strollers, any kind of mode is allowed that's non-motorized. Okay. I like to think of greenways as half parks and half transportation. And DCR owns hundreds of miles of greenways across the state, and we're working to create a vast network for active transportation and recreation. These paths have an enormous positive impact on local communities. It facilitates carbon-free transportation, and it connects people with local destinations, with their friends, families, neighbors. It provides access to recreation for mental and physical health benefits. And during the pandemic, Massachusetts state parks saw a 300% increase in use during that time. So awesome. It really, during that time, it amplified the benefits that we see every day. And then there's another term that we're going to use today called a rail trail. And a rail trail is a subset of greenways. They're public paths built on former railroad tracks. And Massachusetts has quite a network of historic railroads that has formed the foundation for this vast network of trails that we're building today. Nice. Should I go into the Mass Central Rail Trail?
Is that your main focus?
That is one statewide network that both DCR, MassDOT, and the Executive Office of Energy and Environment are working to build out with many state and local partners. So the Mass Central Rail Trail aims to transform the historic Massachusetts Central Railroad into a continuous shared use path. We often call it the MCRT for shorthand. The envisioned MCRT will connect 26 cities and towns and span 104 miles from Northampton to Boston. Currently, there's 70 miles that are open to the public and 20 miles in active design, planning, and construction. When completed, the Mass Central Rail Trail will tie together 18 existing and proposed trails to create a 273-mile trail network connecting 4.4 million people that live within 10 miles of the trails. Several years ago, there was a study that was conducted to evaluate the economic impact of a completed MCRT. Okay. And they found that a potential $212 million could be brought in through economic development and tourism, and up to 5.5 million annual visitors. So it's quite a big vision across the state and one that's been in progress for quite a while. So I can talk through the history just briefly, and then I'll take us to where we are today in Sudbury, Stow, and Hudson. Okay. So 50 years ago, much of the railroad operations of the Mass Central were abandoned or dormant. 30 years ago, the first section of the MCRT was built called the Norwottic Rail Trail in Amherst, Hadley, and Northampton. 15 years ago, DCR entered into a lease with the MBTA for the 23-mile of the Mass Central called the Wayside Trail, and that stretches from Waltham to Berlin. Okay. So DCR has some ownership rights over that section.
So we're in the Wayside area?
That's right. So this is in the Wayside area. And 6 years ago, a 5-mile long stretch from Weston to Wayland opened in partnership and facilitated with Eversource's Grid Enhancement Project. So that same partnership that built those 5 miles is what has allowed this next stretch that I'm going to talk about to be built today. Okay. So Mass Central, we call it MCRT Sudbury to Hudson, SudHUD for short, MCRT SudHUD, is a 7.5-mile stretch of the Wayside Corridor from the Assabet River Rail Trail parking lot on Wilkins Street through Stow all the way to the Sudbury Eversource station. And what you need to know about the development of this path is that there's 2 phases of the project. Eversource built out the first phase, which was just completed in December 2024.
What does that consist of?
What?
What is the phase? Is it basically just the
So that's what I'm
groundwork
gonna.
for it?
Yes,
Oh, I'm sorry.
exactly. You're leading me right to where I'm going, which is
Sorry.
so of that 7.5 mile corridor, Eversource did all the clearing and grubbing of the corridor. They buried the utilities. They built the sub base. They reconstructed 3 railroad bridges, and they did some fencing, and laid the sub base down that will comprise the trail. They also did quite a lot of restoration plantings along the way. So quite literally, Eversource laid the groundwork for our work, which is phase 2. And so phase 2 is beginning this spring, and DCR will pave a 10-foot wide shared use path with 2-foot soft surface shoulders so people can walk and run on the side. And we're going to do fencing, signage, and benches as part of that work. So a signature design element that's really unique is what we call the Diamond Junction, and that's in Sudbury. It's going to be a bicycle and pedestrian roundabout, and it's where the original railroad tracks intersected with the Framingham-Lowell Railroad and the Massachusetts Central Railroad. So today, that is the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and the Mass Central Rail Trail. Okay. So that's going to be a really cool thing to look forward to that we're building as part of this as well. Another interesting feature of the Mass Central Rail Trail Sudbury to Hudson is that it intersects hundreds of acres of conservation land around the Sudbury Valley Trustees land, Marlborough-Sudbury State Forest. So it has a really great connection to conservation land, to walking trails, as well as connecting to community destinations in Hudson, Sudbury, and Stow.
Nice.
And then, yeah, as far as funding, this was a great example of a public-private partnership with Eversource doing quite a bit of work for 2 years and a lot of money to build phase 1, and then DCR is funding phase 2, which I alluded to with the paving and the fencing and everything, and that is funded by the Massachusetts State Capital Plan.
Oh, nice.
So what to look forward to this year in 2025. The 7.5 mile stretch will be built for the public to use. DCR is also working on 2 other projects along the Wayside Corridor. We're restoring 2 bridges, 2 rail bridges, one on the Waltham-Weston border and one further into Waltham, and those will also be done in 2025. In the next 2 to 3 years, we're also advancing design of a 1.5 mile section where this one ends on the eastern terminus in Sudbury over the Sudbury River into Wayland Town Center. We anticipate that'll be designed and permitted by the middle of 2026, and construction will begin soon thereafter.
Right.
And then the town of Hudson is advancing the design of the MCRT extending west from where we are towards Berlin. Okay. And they're doing that funded through a number of sources, including Mass Trails grants, which our organization gives out every year.
Okay.
So it's quite a lot of exciting progress when you think about the history of the entire MCRT, spanning back to 30, 50, and the beginning of the railroads hundreds of years ago. So finally, this decade-long vision is coming to life mile by mile, town by town, and Stow gets to be part of the fun. So.
And our section is how long?
7.5 miles. Oh,
Just
400
Stow.
feet in Stow. 400 feet. But important nonetheless, right?
Absolutely.
Can't have that piece. That's what these networks are all about, is assembling piece by piece by piece, so that they're all connected and you can have a seamless user experience. The other thing that I'll mention is that a lot of these paths, it's like building a cake or something. You're kind of building up the layers. So you can see that Eversource did a really significant, important foundational piece. We're building the basics of the rail trail. Restrooms, water fountains, kiosks, all those types of things. Those are not included in this project, but will be added on over time and potentially to be done by different entities. For the 23-mile stretch of the MCRT that I talked about, it spans many communities. And so DCR is the ultimate, we have care and control and ownership over the path, but we work very closely with communities to partner on maintenance, on adding things like benches and signs and water fountains. A lot of times, the easiest thing for folks to do is porta potties instead of a brick and mortar restroom, which can be just too big of a capital investment and ongoing maintenance. But certainly those amenities are a really important part of the trail functioning well.
Right.
And we're also looking at creating more trailhead parking lots over time. That also is like a separate effort. But you know, these will evolve forever with all the community's input. And I should also acknowledge that there have been just many communities that have been advocating for this path for so many years. So I'd like to thank all the communities that have been a part of that. And there's a number of local groups where folks can get involved to help volunteer. One of them is the Rail Trail Advisory Committee in Sudbury. Because Sudbury has so many rail trails with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail coming in, that volunteer-led group is doing a lot to help with maintenance, help with advocacy, a number of different items like that.
Right.
So, and I think over time, as these paths are built, even more constituencies and groups will be built around them. This has been in design for, let's see if I can get this right, but 2018, so almost 10 years.
But you've got the design process.
Yeah.
But people don't really get involved until it's right beside them, until they can see it, right? So were you getting pushback in 2018?
Yeah, so this project has been in design and permitting for quite a while, since 2018 or maybe even before. We had to get three key permits. There's a lot of other ones, but Sudbury, Stow, and Hudson, and there was a lot of pushback in Sudbury. A lot of community members that felt threatened by a new path coming through their backyards. The corridor itself still had the rails in the ground, and all of the trees had grown up, so there was removing trees, which is contentious, and people felt that the path would detract from the character of the town, maybe make them feel a little unsafe. What we have seen time and time again, mile by mile, in the whole state, is once these paths are built, the people that live along the path actually are some of the biggest advocates because they're using it every day and is a part of their life. So, once all the permitting and the many, many, many public meetings and even several lawsuits all kind of went away, there has been really no opposition in the last year or two. And now that Eversource has done their piece, people can see, wow, this is actually an asset and something that could be great for our community. So it's nice that it's kind of everyone's come full circle and recognize the value. And then, when there's still opposition in other communities, which there's less and less, I would say these days, they can come out and physically see what these spaces look like and maybe not feel so threatened.
Right. Well, in something as large as this, you put it in, it's all shiny and new.
Yeah.
And then after time, it loses its shine.
Yeah.
Is there a plan in place that will, or is this a promise by the cities and towns that they will be maintained? Yeah.
I mean, you can argue that it'll lose its shine over time and, eventually you have to replace the pavement. And that's something that DCR will do, is like those ongoing capital improvements. But actually, I would argue that over time, they almost become more loved and more people get involved. And if you look at the Minuteman Path, which has been around for quite a while, there's so many public art programs that go along it. And, it actually almost becomes nicer in a way because there is much more pride and community spirit. If you think about this path is like age zero, really, here in Sudbury and Hudson. And so seeing it evolve over time, I think, is going to be really exciting. And we do have to make sure that we keep up the basics. That's really what people want, is the basics. They want a water fountain, a restroom, pavement that doesn't have cracks in it, right? Places to sit with benches. So those are the things that we have to stay on top of over time. And, I'll be honest that the state's stretched thin with managing all of these public spaces across the state. And It's not easy, but that's why it's really great when we can partner with local cities and towns and have volunteer events and have the community members help with the evolution of the path.
So volunteer events, do you guys initiate any of those, or are they just organic in the towns and cities?
It's a combination of both. DCR hosts some official events, like Park Serve Day happens at the end of April, and we host events all over the whole state for our parks. Now, the thing that's interesting about the MCRT, particularly here, this is a new facility that was not a DCR park, right? So it has to kind of come online as a new part of our state portfolio.
Yep.
Yeah, but as you know, when groups can initiate on their own and decide to help out, I mean, that helps us out.
So if you guys are if DCR is in charge of the whole rail trail, is it all of them or just the one that's going to run from Boston to?
DCR has maintenance responsibilities for the section from Waltham to what now is basically Hudson.
Okay.
So that would include Waltham, Weston, Wayland, Sudbury, Stow, and Hudson.
Yep.
Once you go east, Belmont is advancing some pieces right now. Those are not built. Then you go into Cambridge and then Somerville, and each of them kind of has their own, even local names. Like the Somerville Community Path is part of the Mass Central Rail Trail, but it's known as the Somerville Community Path Local.
Right.
So that's really the power of this, is this regional network, but also these local connections, town by town. So people might come in and bike the whole thing from Northampton to Boston, and someone that lives in Hudson goes out their door every day to get to where they need to go, or to run or bike or walk or all those things.
Well, what I'm wondering is if DCR is responsible for Boston to Northampton, is
No,
that
just the 23 mile.
Okay, all right.
So all the other ones are just different communities and different ownership.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so what happened, I don't know all of the backstory, but it's the MBTA held this wayside corridor. They own it.
Okay.
But only that
Right
piece
away.
of it. So the T doesn't own out in, say, Northampton.
Right.
Yeah.
What did it take to get all these communities to start talking? I mean, that's...
Yeah. So the Norwottic network is really, and that's the one I alluded to 30 years ago, that first stretch was opened in Northampton, Hadley, and Amherst. So a lot of those folks have been leading the charge for many years, trying to coordinate all the groups. The biggest piece was to preserve the corridor so that the actual right-of-way is there to build a path.
Right.
And I think that's like 90-some% done. There's only a couple of small pieces. So it's all preserved, and now it's just a matter of finding funding for each piece and having the right capacity of project management to do the design and oversee construction. So it's really a patchwork of these 26 cities and towns.
And would you be part of that going forward?
I mean, right now we're just focused on the stretch that we have the lease for.
Yeah.
But I think our statewide mass trails team that I alluded to, that includes EEA, MassDOT, and DCR, we're coordinating very regularly on how to get all these pieces funded, whether it be giving grants to local communities or providing capacity as far as project management. This will kind of evolve over time.
So we do notice that we can see what Eversource has done.
Yep.
And we see signs that say, do not enter.
That's right. That's right. So currently, Eversource is still in ownership of the site as it relates to construction.
They haven't turned it over
Their
yet.
handover to us is April 1st.
Oh.
And at that point, we have a contractor that we're in the process right now of contracting with. They'll come in and assume ownership of the site from a construction perspective. So we'll be putting up new do not enter signs while we're doing the construction. Our hope is that we can pave the whole corridor by June.
Oh, nice.
There's a lot of things like plantings and fencing that might come afterwards, but we really want to lay that first part down. And so we will be having, again, signs up. We know right now it's a very attractive place for people to walk and bike with the gravel subbase that is there. And so we're going to have to make sure people stay off when we're in active construction, segment by segment.
So if people are avoiding or ignoring the do not enter
Yep.
signs, what would this do to the schedule of actually opening?
Doesn't impact
Would the
it.
June schedule slip?
No. But it is a challenge. It's a challenge for a project. If you think about a building, right? You can very easily put a fence around that building and say, this is where we're doing construction. When you are doing a 7.5-mile stretch that has 13 crossings, whether it be an underpass or a road, there's a lot of ways for people to get in, not to mention all the houses. So it's a challenge for a contractor, but they're used to doing this type of work and just have to have bodies out there and extra signage, fencing when they're doing the most invasive construction work to keep people safe.
If the signs are up and people are walking, so now they have to bring in other people to get you off of the trail.
Yep.
All right, so if there are no people on the trail, are the chances better that in this 2-month period we are going to have access to, on January 1st, or sometime in, June. Sometime in June, we're going to have access to this rail trail, the whole 7.5 miles.
Right, it's like delayed gratification. If everyone can just kind of stay off and be like, okay, it's just a couple months, we need to wait. And that's part of the, what's great, what would be great for us if we can get the word out that like this path is coming soon. I can see temptation to use it if you're like, is this not coming for years?
Right.
But knowing it's coming very soon, if people can kind of wait, contain themselves, and then, we could open it up with greater ease. So Finish the Rail Trail is a website. Just go to finishtherailtrail.org. And it's a push made by all of these community members that have been advocating up to 30 years for people to learn more about the status of the MCRT, get involved, support it. And as I alluded to, it's a really unique moment for the whole history of the MCRT right now, with so many miles being built and designed, and the more people that can stay in the loop, the faster these projects will happen, and we'll see a completed MCRT in our lifetimes, we hope.
So is there a schedule, like a master schedule, as to when these 104 miles from Boston to Northampton will be completed?
Yeah, there really isn't a master schedule because it is kind of town by town, which seems to be a central principle of Massachusetts government in general, is to have these kind of town by town governance. But there are quite a lot of people that are keeping track of progress and making sure these pieces are happening.
Oh, nice.
Each one's unique, and permitting is really challenging for these projects with the Wetland Protection Act and a number of other state and sometimes federal permits.
Okay, so this website that you sent us to, are they watching that? Are they keeping track?
Yep.
So that's one of the watchdogs?
And that group convenes several times a year. They held a big bike ride where they actually biked from Northampton to Boston this past September.
Oh, nice.
With some of the detours around the sections that are not yet built. So that was designed to, again, raise awareness, increase advocacy for this whole network creation, and that's where the website comes in.
Okay.
There is an interesting backstory with the Sudbury pushback that we received on the permit, because Eversource and DCR were joint applicants. And at one point, Eversource was throwing out the idea of having the big towers for their utilities, kind of like you see in the Weston Wayland section. And there was a lot of pushback on that, which, I can understand. It's more trees have to be removed. Now you have these big eyesores. So the fact that Eversource was able to bury the utilities and have the bike path on top or adjacent to it, it's a pretty good outcome. And I think maybe some of the advocacy did lead us in a better direction, because that was a little more costly for Eversource to do. But
in the long run.
run, if you go to the Weston Wayland section and then this one's much more natural and wooded, doesn't have the towers.
Nice.
So, wasn't all bad pushback, maybe.
Yeah.
That's some of it. I think when you're asking the questions about the whole MCRT, a lot of this work is sort of last man standing work. A lot of our projects, they're 10 years to design and get to construction. That's pretty common.
Just even for the 7.5?
Even for a mile stretch. I'm working on a half-mile stretch in Medford on the Mystic River that took 10 years.
Wow.
With a butter pushback and permits and it, riverfront work. It's complicated. So you just have to be prepared to do these projects for like a decade.
Okay.
And if you have the state and all these community advocates, they're positioned to push for that long. And community members might come and go, residents will come and go. So I can say with confidence that the MCRT vision will keep going and each piece will get built. But there's a couple stretches that are complicated.
Okay. And these are happening simultaneously, because when you look at your map, you can actually click on the different sections.
Yeah, that map is great, actually. Yeah.
And it'll tell you, is it under construction or is it under design?
Yep.
But it doesn't tell you what part or how long they've been in design.
Yeah.
But it could be anywhere. But they're happening simultaneously, which is kind of nice.
And I should say that just because some of these projects have taken a decade to design and permit, they don't all have to take that long. It really depends.
Yep.
And every city and town enforces the Wetland Protection Act in their own jurisdiction too. So that can be a challenge because it's a little bit unpredictable.
So when the sections get completed, is there a ceremony or a grand opening or something that goes on?
Yeah, so that's also just project by project. We hope to have a ribbon cutting for this one. I'm not sure when it'll be yet, but I know like Hublub's interested in that, and the Norwadic Network folks, and then the local Sudbury Hudson advocates.
So when the grand opening happens, it'll be for the whole 7.5 miles, because that was the stretch.
It would be for that piece.
Okay. Yep. So how did you get involved in all these rail trails?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I grew up on a rail trail outside D.C.
Okay.
It's the Washington and Old Dominion Railroad, which went from D.C. all the way out to Leesburg, maybe even beyond to West Virginia. And so I grew up just using it every day. It connected me to little parks and streams by my house, and maybe that's when the early seeds were planted. But fast forward, however many decades, I went and got my degree as a landscape architect. Okay. And I began to work in park planning, urban planning. And about a decade ago, I started working at the Mystic River Watershed Association, and I started their Greenway program there that sought to connect 25 miles of paths from the Mystic Lakes down to Boston Harbor.
Nice.
That's another place where there was like a patchwork of paths, but they weren't all connected for various reasons. So I got involved in that. And then personally, I'm a long distance runner and I'm a cyclist, so I like to do that anyway. So it works out that I get to do this for my job.
Nice. So anybody wanting to get involved, what would you recommend?
I mean, as I alluded to with the MCRT, it has this statewide, regional component to it, but at the core, each city and town both has ownership of their pieces from like a maintenance and stewardship perspective, but also even in just getting it done. So first I would ask, tell folks to go see what local groups exist. For example, in Somerville, there's Friends of the Community Path. In Sudbury, it's the Rail Trail Committee. They're all different. Sometimes they're bike ped organizations, which I think it is in Wayland. In Hudson, there's Hudson Safe Streets. So that's a really good way to kind of get in locally and meet your neighbors, your community, and then those groups are connected up through like larger advocacy networks on MCRT.
Okay.
And then, for the wayside stretch, everything would be in partnership with DCR, for example. And as we are building all these paths and they're coming online, we're getting organized around getting our operations staff to get involved. Things as simple as making sure when you want to do an event on DCR land, the MCRT is an option, for example, because it's a newer park.
Yeah, nice.
So I think that's what I would recommend.
So are you involved, in your capacity, are you involved with these organizations that are startup like the Hudson?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat informally. it's helpful to have community support when you're going through the permitting and public process, just to have other people there that support. Again, the number of people that are trying to stop these paths from being developed are far and few between, but even when there's a couple opposition, it's good to have a lot of support to counterbalance that.
Yep.
And, we're in touch all the time about, like, Wayland wanted to do historic signs and wanted to do more benches. So we said, okay, what's your proposal? And we worked together to figure out what we can put where, and it's kind of a nice organic partnership.
Okay.
But then we also do have these formal MOUs at the city and town level for helping with more routine maintenance.
Okay. But as shown in Sudbury, opposition isn't always bad.
Right. It can maybe get a better outcome, and Protect Sudbury was the group that was incorporated to fight this, and they are now unincorporated.
Oh,
So,
they got what they needed.
yep. So to the whole point about last man standing, you just kind of keep going and you follow the the community sentiment as much as you can, but also, like, keep your eyes focused on the bigger picture
Okay.
vision. And yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the grand opening for a little bit.
Yep.
When that happens, where does it get advertised? Because if you're not hooked in, you don't know where to look.
It's a great point. My guess is that some of these websites that I sent you, like the Hub Love website, the Finish the Rail Trail website, I think there was another one for MCRT, look there. And really, social media is a much more facile way for people to get information out versus updating a website. So some of those links I sent you were Instagram. I think there was an Instagram link. That's probably the best way to get up-to-date information. But my hope is we can do it this summer, maybe fall.
So is that a different department?
Yeah, so that's, and then, DCR also we have an Instagram account.
Yep.
So any event that we're doing would get advertised there.
Okay.
That's a great place to find out more information just about state parks in general. And we have just so much programming. We do first day walks, we do the Park Serve Day, and all kinds of educational opportunities.
So what happens at a Park Serve Day?
Park Serve Day is you show up at a park, you get 20, 40, 50 volunteers and pick up trash.
Oh.
That's really what it is. Kind of a spring cleaning.
Yeah. Community
So
service.
that's at the end of April when everyone's coming out from the thaw.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll be underway building this project.
Nice.
Around then.
There are rules of the roads and common
Oh, right.
courtesies
You asked me about
on
this.
bike trails.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know them.
Yep. This one was a tricky one. I couldn't point you to exact links, but I can tell you the big picture of just in general courtesy rules and safety. So as I alluded to, our greenways are for all types of non-motorized transportation. You can run, you can ride your bike, you can push a stroller, you can use a wheelchair. Now these are all different modes that if there's too many together, it can get a little busy. And the general rule is yield to the person that's slower than you, right? And so when you're passing, let people know. If you're on a bike, you're probably one of the faster ones, so slow down when there's more people. We don't have them posted now, but there is best practices around. Generally, if you're going more than 15 miles per hour, that's fast for our paths. 20 is getting a little dangerous. A lot of people don't know how fast they're going, but some do if you have an e-bike. And then, so e-bikes is a whole other thing that we do allow Class 1 e-bikes on our recreational paths. And that is a pedal assist that goes up to, I think, 22 miles per hour. Class 2 and 3 e-bikes, 3 goes the fastest, up to like 27. And 2, you can actually ride it without pedaling. So what's allowed on our paths is the lowest level class. But now you're also seeing other e-devices like scooters, electric scooters. So we just would ask people to be safe, to be courteous to users around them. Kind of common sense.
Right.
And because we do have, I alluded to this 10-foot wide path with 2-foot soft surface shoulders, and a lot of times runners or walkers will go on that, so it kind of expands the amount of space that's available and separates modes out.
And will there be a line down the middle of the?
We've debated about that for the context here based on where it is, what kind of volumes we're going to see. For right now, we're not going to stripe it. We own the Southwest Corridor Park, which runs from Back Bay to Jamaica Plain in the city of Boston, and we just striped that one. But that is sees very heavy use for transportation, and it connects to all the transit lines.
Yep.
That was a really important place to put the line. We also have a dash line on the Charles River paths and the Esplanade. That's where we have a dual path system, so you have a pedestrian path and a bike path.
Oh.
And so the striped center line designates which path is which, whereas here it's all shared use in one. But that's something that when I discuss things can happen over time, adding striping is an easy thing to do. So first just get the paving down and see how people are using it. And we don't like to design for problems that are just anticipated in the future. We want to see what is actually happening and then respond to that.
Okay.
So.
And do you find that it takes a while for people to get, probably not so much anymore. I just remember the Hudson one, it took a while for people to start using it.
I think so. Yeah, this one I think is going to be pretty distinct from the Assabet River Rail Trail because the Bruce Freeman now comes from Concord and hits all the way into where the MCRT is going to come in. So there's and then you have the Assabet River Rail Trail here. So this is connecting existing paths. So there's already going to be pent-up demand that I think we'll see pretty high volumes quickly as compared to that one.
Okay.
And then once it connects to Wayland Town Center in that stretch, you can go all the way into Belmont almost.
Right.
So that'll be
nice.
This is, again, things will evolve over time. There'll be new best practices. People 50 years from now might look back and say, what were they thinking with a 10-foot path? But the problem is community members often are like, well, let's have a 20-foot path. But all that's going to do is actually encourage people to go faster.
Right.
So it can work against you if you get too wide.
Right.
But we're looking at, a lot of people now are doing 12-foot wide paths. This one's 10-foot wide. The first piece, the Norwottic Rail Trail, was 8 feet wide. No one does 8 feet anymore, but that's what we were doing 30 years ago. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. This has been
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's great to be here.
And I'm looking forward to the grand opening, which is scheduled for sometime in June.
Well, we probably won't have the grand opening then, but maybe summer or fall of this year.
Okay.
We'll hope for 2025.